When talking about four-player retro video games, most of our minds immediately, of course, go to the N64. It was the first system to have 4 controller ports built into the system so that you could hook up 4 controllers and play multiplayer games. You had so many awesome and memorable 4-player games on the system, whether you were into racing games like Diddy Kong Racing or Mario Kart, wrestling games like WCW NWO Revenge, or even first-person shooters like GoldenEye and Perfect Dark. There was tons of awesome 4-player experiences that, in an era where online gaming was not a thing, it was the best way to play multiplayer games. But is it really fair to think of the N64 as the first system to really implement 4-player games? I don't necessarily think it is. You have to look back to the original system that I had, the first system that got me into video games, and that would be the NES. There was something called the NES Four Score, which allowed you to hook up 4 different controllers to your NES and play from some select games that actually supported 4-player support. So over on the Patreon page, Alan decided he wanted me to make a video talking about the most fun 4-player games for the NES, and I thought it would be a cool video. It's not something you see a whole lot of people talk about, and I think it's something very interesting. So in this video, we're going to check out the 4-player NES games that are worth playing, that are worth checking out, and it's worth hooking up an NES Advantage, or if you have something like the Retro USB AVS, hooking up those 4 controllers and having some fun with your friends. So sit back, relax, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and let's check out some 4-player NES games.
Hey, RGT 85. Hey, Sean.
Oh my God, it's Stevie Richards!
The first 2 games we're going to talk about are sports games because sports games rule. Well, maybe not, but they do lend themselves to some good 4-player action on the NES. The first one is Kings of the Beach. Have you ever wanted to be the king of the beach? Well, now is your chance. It's a 2-on-2 volleyball game that has you, well, playing volleyball. In terms of presentation, it's pretty simple. The graphics are pretty minimal, the backgrounds aren't very interesting, and the audio is pretty plain as well, but the gameplay is pretty solid. Hit the beach, spike the ball, score some points, and earn your crown as the king of the beach. The control is pretty smooth, and honestly, you can have a good time with 2-on-2 action in this game. Next up, we have Nintendo World Cup. You won't be king of the soccer field like you were on the volleyball court, but what you can do is some decent 2-on-2 soccer action. Choose a team, hit the field, and play soccer. Pretty self-explanatory stuff. The game moves a little slow, and there's still some slowdown when you're actually playing the game as well, but the character sprites are nice and have a lot of personality, including facial expressions. The soccer action is decent enough, and it can be pretty fun with some friends. Plus, it's a super cheap game to pick up, and you probably already own it. Smash TV is on this list, and while technically it isn't a 4-player game, you can use 4 controllers, so we are counting it. Smash TV is a pseudo game show, win big prizes, blow things up and blow up enemies, and of course, stay alive. This is probably the most unique use of 4 controllers on the NES, because 2 players use 2 controllers. One D-pad can be used for your movement of the character, while the other D-pad is used for your gunfire. It works surprisingly well and much better than the default controls of just using 1 controller. It definitely feels a lot more like the arcade game. I suppose you could use 4 players with this, but I probably wouldn't recommend it because let's face it, Smash TV is a tough game. The game looks decent enough and has fast arcade action. Plus, I think every NES collector has a copy of this game, so why not play it with a friend or 3 if you're feeling adventurous. A Nightmare on Elm Street is a criminally underrated game for the NES and a solid 2D platformer taking place in the Nightmare universe. Your goal, of course, is to stop Freddy Krueger from killing kids in their dreams because the cops ain't helping your crazy ass out against the dead man infiltrating dreams. Come on now. Collect Freddy's bones, stay awake, and of course, fight different incarnations of Freddy, along with some really weird stock things like bugs and spiders and ghosts. You could team up and play with up to 3 friends though, which is pretty unique for a 2D platformer. The game looks and sounds good in my opinion too, and is a game I love playing from time to time, so it's even better with friends. Check it out if you get a chance. Ivan Iron Man Stewart's Super Off-Road is an arcade racer that doesn't feature Iron Man himself, but instead top-down racing action with up to other 3 players. This is probably the second best game on this list, as it's really a lot of fun. Choose a track and hit the course, race around, take out your friends, and finish in first place. The graphics are solid, the cars look nice, and the gameplay is extremely smooth. It might not be Mario Kart in terms of 4-player action, but on the NES, it's one of the best racing games, period. So the inclusion of 4-player multiplayer makes it a definite must-own. The final game is by far the most expensive game on this list, but also the most fun and the best use of 4-player on the NES. Bomberman 2. Bomberman is a staple of multiplayer games and has always pushed the envelope, with 10 players on the Sega Saturn, and Bomberman 2 on the NES is no slouch either, with frantic 4-player action. Set your bombs, blow stuff up, and try to take out your friends. I'm sure you've played Bomberman before, I think everyone has, but Bomberman 2 is by far the most fun you will have with 4-player action on the NES. Unfortunately, it's a very expensive cart to track down nowadays, but if you can get one for cheap or use an EverDrive, a Bomberman 2 copy, a pizza, a few brews, and 3 friends will have you up to the wee hours of the morning blowing each other up.
And those are the NES games, in my opinion, that bring the most fun when you're talking about up to 4 players. Now, maybe you had the NES Four Score when you were a kid and got to enjoy this, but unfortunately, I did not. My first real interaction with 4-player was, of course, with the N64, so I sort of did miss out on this era of gaming, but maybe you have fond memories of it. Let me know in the comments section down below if you had an NES Four Score, or if you have something like the Retro USB ABS, which has 4 controller ports on it and are able to play these 4-player games and play with some friends. And let me know what you think of these games, and maybe a game or 2 that I might have missed on my list. As always, thank you for checking out this video. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Let me know your thoughts on this video in the comments section down below. If you really liked the video, make sure you check out all of the links in the description box down below. We got Patreon, t-shirts, social media, all sorts of fun stuff, all sorts of ways to keep up to date with everything going on with RGT 85. And as always, I will catch you guys on the next video. Later.
RGT 85! RGT 85! RGT 85!